Please like and leave a heart, please.
There we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Vidor Locksmith Show, where we are unlocking the secrets to success in the oil and gas industry, one interview, one technical presentation, and one technical screw-up at a time. I'm your host, David Gibson. So excited to be here with you guys on this amazing Friday. I had a wonderful week of vacation from the last show that you guys saw me with. Took off right after that. Went up to Cloudcroft, New Mexico. Had a wonderful time up there. Went to Santa Fe. Visited some family, had some good barbecue, had lots of good food, got to rest, relax a little bit, and then got right back to it yesterday here in the office. So I didn't take a full week off, just took a little bit of time off. Got back into the office yesterday, taking care of tons of just the stuff you have to deal with as being a small business owner. Somebody hacked our Microsoft business account, set up a whole bunch of new accounts on their own, but for whatever reason, didn't use our on-file credit card to pay for it. They used their own. So we just kind of had to delete some stuff out of the system. So anyways, it was a very interesting day to be back at work yesterday. Thank you guys all so much for being here and watching the show. Do me a favor. If you guys haven't already, like, share, subscribe, do that kind of stuff. But over on LinkedIn, if you want to get notifications that we're going live, right? Yep, right there. Click the little notification bell. It's right there. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit the follow button. Follow us. Follow me on LinkedIn, right? Put that thing back up there on the screen. Let me know where you guys are watching from. Love to be able to give everybody a shout out here on the screen for the show as we go through. If you can, share the stream. Let some other people know, or tag somebody in the comment section who you think would find the show interesting. Please do that. Got an absolute amazing show lined up for you guys today. So let's go ahead, and we've got a handful of people. So we've got Mr. Gill says greetings from India. Thanks for being here. Mr. John DeWart tuning in from Colorado. Tuning in, raring to go. All right. And then Mr. Paul Moore says good morning. Happy Friday. Thank you guys all so much for being here. Do appreciate it. If you guys didn't notice, we also kicked back off again the How It's Done series. So we had a How It's Done video that we played from the time when we went out and visited the Catoosa test rig. And so got to have a fully immersive experience there. I say fully immersive because you can also watch that tour, which was live streamed onto YouTube in 360 VR. So if you've got an Oculus or at least just one of those VR headsets, you can use with your phone, you can put one of those on and look around and be able to see an infinite number of views right there on the rig floor or any part of the rig that we walked through, that we had the 360 camera. So if you're trying to explain to somebody what it's like actually out on the rig floor, or what things look like, or what it's like to watch a connection take place, that's the video to be able to go do it with, because there's an infinite number of views. You could even just hold your phone up and spin around in your desk chair if you like. So also got Mr. Robert Estes tuning in, says good morning from Tomball, Texas. Thank you for being here, sir. And like Mr. Gill says, let's connect. Let's do it. Send me a connection request and I will accept. All right, guys. Speaking of the How It's Done series, I want to play a little intro video from that just to tease it a little bit. While we're doing that, don't have a sponsor this week, so yours truly is the sponsor for this week's show. So if you want one of the drill bits, type in hashtag Gibson and we will get you one of the drill bits sent off. There, now it's in focus. So yeah, if you guys want a drill bit, type in hashtag Gibson into the comment section now. And here is probably one of the best 30-second intros to any show ever. I love it. I get excited every time I listen to this. And then right after that, we'll be back with our guest for today. There you go. And that's from the How It's Done series. That's the intro. If you haven't seen the How It's Done series, it's all over there on YouTube. Go over to Gibson Reports on YouTube. Pretty easy to find. Go take a look at it. You'll absolutely enjoy the series. We've done, I don't know how many episodes so far for this season.
4.
So we've done 4 episodes. So we have 10 for the season 1, and we're at the 4th episode right now on season 2. So be sure to go over there and check those out. And like I said, put in hashtag Gibson if you want to be able to win yourself a drill bit. Not many people putting them in this week, so your chances are pretty high to winning. All right. Now let's introduce our guest of the day, Mr. Duncan Blue. Duncan, thank you for being on the show, sir.
Well, thank you for having me on. It's going to be, I think we're going to have fun.
All right. Well, let me, just to be able to kind of get us started, for those that don't know who you are, can you give us a little bit of background on yourself?
Sure. I'm one of the old timers. There's a few of us on here that I recognize, but been around since, been in the industry since 1976. Started off with Schlumberger, spent a couple of years there. Went on to various companies. I worked for Santa Fe Drilling for a number of years doing contracts. My longest term employment was with Baker Hughes. I was with them for over 26 years. In any aspect, probably every aspect of the drilling side of that company, from working out in the field as a mudlogger, LWD operator, moved into sales, did sales in New Orleans for a number of years. And then moved into technology development with Baker. I hold several patents, including the most used piece of software in the oil and gas industry, the Baker Hughes rig count. I headed that team up, and we developed the new look of the Baker Hughes rig count. It's not so new anymore, but at the time it was pretty innovative, tied into the GIS map and that type of thing.
Wow.
After Baker, I spent a little time at Weatherford, very short period of time there. Then Halliburton convinced me to go to work over there. A week after I accepted a job at Halliburton, that's when they announced the Baker-Halliburton attempted merger. So there were things going on in the background that, and I acted actually in a fairly high level of that team, trying to pull all that together. I was working on the drilling side of that, and I have one patent with Halliburton and probably another one coming out shortly. So my fun has been in talking to clients, talking to various people in the industry, and helping them develop and perfect software and hardware and technology, basically, to help them drill deeper, cheaper, faster, more efficient, and better results.
Wow, I mean, that's quite the scope of different things to have worked on there. I mean, to go from mudlogging to working on the Baker Hughes rig report, it's quite the and then obviously being involved in one of the what could have been the largest possible oil field service mergers ever.
Yep.
But obviously, probably a lot of the things behind the scenes that hasn't been told, or probably is not allowed to be told.
Yeah. Some of it,
yeah. So we were talking before the show about some of your predictions for this year. What are those predictions that you have that you're holding steadfast to?
Yeah, I do it every year. January 1st, I posted on my LinkedIn that I said the price of oil was going to end up at 85 a barrel at the end of this year, and I think I'm still sticking by that. I see some things that it slowed down, and it always slows down, and it always goes up. But I think at the end of the year, we're going to be right around that $85 a barrel range. So there's some indications that the sleeping giant of China is not stopping, and they need hydrocarbons desperately. So there's going to be a huge still a demand out there. I don't see anything weakening too much. It's slowing down in the Permian it's the Permian. It's going to always slow down in the Permian, just when everybody gets excited about it. But I think I'm sticking by that one.
Why do you think it is that things slow down so quickly in the Permian?
Well, first of all, it's easy to slow down in the Permian. there's so much infrastructure there that companies can react at the drop of a hat to let's lay some rigs down. They're not under any kind of contracts typically. When they see the price of oil dropping, they'll drop rigs as fast as they can. They're lining their ducks up in a row to use a pun, both the quack duck and the uncompleted ducks, because they're still going to make money. So it's quick to react both positive and negative, as we saw back after the pandemic. It probably reacted faster than any other area. This time they did a little bit smarter than they did before the pre-pandemic when things were in a tailspin there. But the operators that are back out there are doing it right again this time.
Now, do you think that part of that, because I've seen a handful of people post about this, either in different forums or places here on the internet, that, saying, whatever the job title might be, saying, hey, been let go due to downsizing or the slowdown. Could that actually just be the simple fact that we're drilling faster and the efficiency has gone up, and it's not so much the price of oil?
Oh yeah, that has a lot to do with it. Absolutely. I saw a major shift change in the rig count. I'm familiar with that a little bit. In the past, there was no such thing as factory drilling. There was no such thing as pad drilling. It primarily vertical or directional wells. Horizontals hadn't started yet. So, at that point, the rig count was up over 4,000, 5,000 rigs. Then all of a sudden, companies like Baker developed and started to perfect horizontal drilling. That's when the Austin Chalk really started up, and they discovered they didn't need as many rigs to drill the same number of wells. They could just slide one slot over, and almost like working in an offshore platform where you got 26 holes or 26 slots, and you just move the equipment a couple of feet over to the left or the right or backwards or forwards, and you don't need the number of rigs to drill the number of wells. And then when fracking came along, they started trying to do a little bit better, getting a lot more production out of these wells than traditional verticals. So they didn't need to drill as many wells. And you're right, the efficiencies, the service companies and the drilling contractors, I've always said this, we're our own worst enemies. And the fact that we do everything that we can to make that operator or help that operator save money, as a good client should, or a good service provider should. But the reality is, back in the day, it would take 15 drill bits to drill a well. Now you can do it with one. Well, that had to hurt the drill bit industry. Absolutely. The same thing with these. We call it mud, but that's a very complex system of chemistry that goes in there, and it's amazing how much better it reacts to the formations or doesn't react to the formations, and cleans the hole and does everything that it's supposed to do. The technology that's coming around. I'm still a little, and John DeWart's going to jump all over me for this one. I'm not a big. The jury's out with me on what we're considering automation. It's getting a lot better. Because historically what we've done is not really automation, it's been mechanization. We've learned how to move pipe around with equipment rather than people. We're just starting to get into what I'm considering some true automation, where the systems know where the other systems are and how they react, and where they need to be and where they should be. So to me, we're still in the very early stages of that. So, but I do think that there's some potential there, but I don't think we'll ever perfect it, because Mother Nature is not perfect, or Mother Nature is perfect and we just don't understand her. So there's not always a way that we can automate around her.
So one of the questions that I wanted to be able to ask you, and it kind of segues into what we were just talking about. So real quick, I've had people like David Reed, Fred Florence, Matt Isbell, John DeWart, Mark Anderson, Eric Van Ort, Maury Lang, and the list goes on, right? That was just what I pulled off of my head real quick.
Oh my
right?
God. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So we've got essentially Hall of Fame row, Fred Dupriest, Graham Benson Wilmite, right? Even more people who have been in the drilling industry for a substantial amount of time and doing exactly what you said, which was helping the client / operator be able to save money, whether some of those people were internally with operators,
Right.
or even some of them that were internal have now gone external and are helping to develop either talent, whatever. We've continued to do this over and over and over, and we've seen, just like you said, we've gone from just vertical and directional wells into horizontal wells and being able to skid rigs over, going from 8 drill bits down to 1 or 2. All of this technological development, right? But at the end of the day, do we need to, and this is the question, do we need to be able to have that same level of innovation on the business model side? And this is where, wanting to be able to have you on the show, because we had Maury on the show, and he's the drilling automation guy. And then almost 75% of the show was about the business model and how do we pay for these things, and then be able to recoup the cost of R&D and everything else. So is it one of those things where we can talk about automation all we want, but if we start looking at cause and effect and we start going all the way down to root cause things, is the root cause that we all need to be actually focusing on now and where the innovation needs to be, is it with the business model? I want to be able to, throwing all of that out there to be able to let you talk for as long as you want about this, because I know there's a lot to unpackage there.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I always relate this personal. When I first started in the mudlogging industry, the 99% of my work activity, but either in the field or in sales with the bigger service companies, dealt with deep water, complex offshore wells. Well, from the mudlogging perspective, the X-Logs, the Halliburtons, the Bakers, the Weatherfords, the bigger mudlogging companies, back in the 70s, we were charging $2,000 a day for a mudlogging unit. I would say that they're probably still getting around $2,000 a day for a mudlogging unit. Now, inflation has changed considerably. Systems have changed considerably. But the reality is the service companies have done everything they can to make reality happen for the operators. Bless their hearts. The operators pay our bills. We love the operators. If it weren't for the operators, we'd all be standing on the corner and said, we'll wash your car for food or something. I don't know what we'd be doing. But the reality is the business model has changed very little with all of the innovation and technology. Back in the day, the Shells, the Exxons, the Mobiles, the Tennecos spent quite a bit of money on research and development. A lot of the early innovation came from those companies. Today, they're still spending some money in R&D, but it's really more on the pure science side of it. Whereas the service companies, and I've been involved in a lot of this, take that pure science, the measurement, what they need to see, and turn it into reality by building the tool, by building the process, by making it happen so that it can be commercialized, so that the operators can use the science they discovered combined with the technology that we developed to achieve their goal. Now, yeah, everybody says, well, yeah, but they charge a lot of money for a new LWD tool that goes down hole or a new widget that measures whatever on the surface. And we do for a little while, but then the reality is business slaps us in the face and it eventually becomes commoditized. MWD, when it first came out, was the most fantastic thing you've ever seen.
What a time to be alive.
Yeah, the drillers were the old directional drillers that did the shot glass and the whole thing. They didn't understand it. They thought it was going to kill them, and the reality is it did change their industry a lot. But the my screen disappeared. My screen disappeared. My screensaver got me. But but the reality is everything becomes commodity, and the operators are getting advantage of taking that new technology, that technology that was new 2 years ago, and all of a sudden everybody's got it. Good old capitalism, good old competition, and the prices go down. It's the nature of the game. But the problem is the service companies, although we make a lot of money and there's great innovation there, the model that service companies get paid probably needs to change. So, because what we're seeing is the service companies don't understand risks. The operators live in the world of risk. They're the bankers. They put the money out. They spend the money to develop the prospects. They spend years and years developing a field and looking at the rocks and figuring out what the maps are going to do and what the volumes of oil or gas potentials are. And then they take a big risk and they poke a hole in the ground, and maybe one time out of 8 or 9 wells, they are successful on an exploration well. Development and exploitation well, the success rate's a lot higher. So the reality is there's less risk there, but there's still a certain amount of risk because there's going to either be a Mother Nature surprise or there's going to be a mechanical problem that are going to cause that well to be a failure. And the service companies, again, don't understand risk. They have this attitude of, well, I'm going to send people and equipment on location, and so I should expect so much per day for that equipment and those people. I think that there can be a compromise in the way that we do business, but both sides are reluctant to change. And the compromise that I'm thinking is let both sides take some risk, allow the risk to be limited for the service company, but allow the reward to be limited as well. So what has to happen is that let's say that the service company sends people and equipment on location. You got to pay your people, so charge for the people. If the well is successful, reward the service company with a small piece of that initial production or some production arrangement for a short period of time until they get their costs covered, they get their profit covered, and because they've allowed that operator to drill that well at a little lower cost, they're rewarded for, in effect, becoming a small investor in that oil and gas well. I think it can be done, but everybody is up in the air. They always, we can't do that. That's it's going to mess everybody up. But I think we need to start looking at innovative changes like that to encourage the service companies to go out. Now, I've written a couple of articles in JPT right at the beginning of the pandemic, literally at the very beginning of the pandemic, when the service companies were laying their entire technology groups off. So I was a guest editorialist. They wanted to know what I was going to think, and the tagline that I used, it's the end of the world as we know it, but it's going to be all right. And that was kind of the encouragement that I had is, yes, the good thing is the service companies developed a lot of good technology that was going to be available. The bad news was for a couple of years, there was going to be no innovation, nothing new coming out, nothing was going to happen. And sure enough, it was right. They asked me to come back and do a follow-up 2 years later about how things have changed, and I was talking about it. And at that time, I was saying the real innovation is still, and it always has been, with the smaller niche boutique type companies that know one thing, they know it very well, and they develop something that does it very well, and then they eventually get bought out by a Schlumberger, a Baker, or a Halliburton, whoever. And it helps because those guys, they put their lifeblood into it. They develop it, and they make some good money, and they go away very happy. I've got that happened when I was younger. I had a guy across the street from me who was building something in his backyard. He did it for years, and I used to give him a bad time. I'd bring a 6-pack of beer over, and I'd make fun of him for building this thing. He was an engineer at BP at the time, or Ohio at the time, as a matter of fact, before BP bought him out. And sure enough, he ended up selling his little company to one of the major service companies for $30 million. But it took him 25 years to do it. Every waking hour he was working on that device. Well, he did great. But that's where the innovation comes from, somebody with a passion that does it. So what I'm seeing is unless we can get that reward back to the service companies, that passion, that innovation will soon be stifled, because there comes the point of diminishing return on, I just can't justify building that expensive tool or even looking at that research to do that unless I can get a better reward out of it. And I sure can't pay my people. Can you imagine? I was involved in the U.S. land mud logging business last year, and that's abysmal when it comes down to the amount of money those graduate geologists are being paid to sit on those well sites for 30, 40, 50, 60 days at a time. And just, it's a killer. And small companies can't afford to pay them any more money because their clients are not paying them any more money. At $800 a day, you can't pay for a couple of people in a logging trailer with the gas systems and microscopes and everything else that goes with that to make any money. And yet it's still a vital piece of what we do. We need to do that. So there's got to be something that's going to change that business model. And that's kind of what I've been preaching lately, is standing on every soapbox that I can. So let's figure this out. Let's make this happen.
So one of my soapboxes that I like to be able to stand on as far as business model and the innovation in that side is telling companies, don't build your pricing based off of the number of rigs that you're on, right? Dollars per days, as opposed to putting it on to the thing that you're actually trying to achieve, which is more footage, right? Attach it.
No. You're going down the wrong road. More footage doesn't mean anything. It's how much more hydrocarbon can we get out? The volume of hydrocarbon and the value of that. You could drill the world's record length well, and I got more footage. It's a dry hole. What good has that done you? So it's got to be tied back to that common thing that we're all in this business for. How much grease can we get out of the ground? And can we do it safely? Can we do it efficiently? And how do we optimize that? And that's where both the service company and the operator have always been sort of in a combinatorial situation. But if the operator would allow the service company to take a small partnership stance in that limited time, limited volume, limited outlay, all of a sudden you start bringing those teams together. And yes, me as the service company has a interest to do this as well, as quickly and as efficiently as possible, and do everything I can to make better recommendations to get that well down into the proper zone. So that's where we need to go. It's not, you got to take the driller hat off and kind of have a half a geologist, half a driller's hat on, and say, we're looking for hydrocarbons, but we do have to make holes in the ground to do that. So how can we marry those two together?
So that's a great question. How do we marry those two together? How do we take on upon that challenge where there is the difficulty of so many different departments that are in charge of getting production to the surface, right? Being able to harvest those hydrocarbons, right?
Yeah.
We've got drilling, or even before that, you've got the G&G team, which is going to be involved in it prior to the well ever even taking place. So there's like you said, the operators on the risk side. So you've got risk from the idea generation point all the way to IP. How do we go about managing that to where the service companies that are involved with the operator are able to know that it's a good idea for them to take upon the risk? And like we said before the show, other people's money. So now they're putting up their money to be able to help drill this well. How do we even orchestrate that to be able to make it become a reality versus just a talking point?
Well, I think what can happen is if traditionally we think of the well site as the focal point, and for many reasons it is, but the real focal point is up in the management level, where the operator has a set budget that he's been allocated make money for his company. The service company has a set budget. I've got to make so much revenue because I've got these many people working and I've got this technology. So I need this number of jobs to make that happen. And it's an ever moving game. The reality is, at a higher level, the management groups have got to come together and in effect, partner up a little bit better to say, we have a common interest here. And the common interest here is to make the operator, be it a mega major like a Shell or a Billy Joe Bob oil and gas and fence company who may drill 2 wells a year, they still have that goal of to get hydrocarbons out of the ground. So somehow we've got to get those service companies and those operators management together to work out how do we put a better economic package, a better economic deal together where they both benefit, a lower risk for the operator because they're not having to maybe necessarily lay out as much money to drill X number of wells. Maybe if they do it right, they could drill X plus 3 extra wells per quarter. And the service company says, I'm going to take a little risk where I'll get my people paid for, but 1 out of 6 wells may be a dry hole. So I may lose a little money. But if we build this right and put some of those dry holes with some productive holes and look at the bigger package, all of a sudden it becomes a better package for both sides. And the operators can drill more wells. The service companies can be a partner in that, and a true partner in the fact that, listen, there's a lot of really good knowledge within the service companies. You know, you talk about the G&G group. Well, there's just as many petrophysicists and geophysicists and geologists working in the service companies as there are in the operators. Matter of fact, most of the big service companies have a lot more of those people than the operators do. And they've probably seen an order of magnitude number of wells more than the typical operator has seen. Allow those service companies to work with your team a little bit closer in making those initial decisions on what do we really have here, by making them a small partner in that well. And not unlimited payout. If the well lasts 30 years, that service company probably shouldn't get all of that, but maybe for the first year's worth of production, they get a percentage of it. And then they move on until a certain level is reached, and everybody agrees to that. So there's a lot of expertise out there that's not being utilized properly.
So at that point in time, wouldn't it just be better for the operator just to become vertically integrated and have all of those services internally?
Yeah, they've tried that. And part of the problem is and again, it goes back to the business model. Think about how a well is drilled. This little magic thing called the AFE, Authorization for Expenditure. Well, the beauty of it is, from the operator's perspective, it goes back to partners, and it's just like owning software or anything else. If the operator brings all of that in, they're paying for 100% of it. Whereas if they allow enough partners in there, they're only paying a percentage of it, where their partners are also paying for a percentage of it. So it's an on-demand service based on the number of wells that we're going to drill. And we partner up with those service companies, allow them to partner up with other operators. But at the same time, it expands the number of experts that you have looking at your well. And from the service company perspective, it's an assurance of we're gonna have this much work so I can build my budgets better. And that becomes very important for a small service company as opposed to the great big ones.
So what would be an initial stepping stone instead of just going from where we're at today into, full plunged into this essentially a short-term profit sharing in the wells? What are some steps that we could take to be able to eventually get to that?
Well, I think some innovative managers in both the service company and the operator side maybe need to get together and some of these forums, either SPE, AAPG, some neutral forum where they can start working out some models like that. And then, again, somebody with, some ability to take some risks. Okay, let's say a Shell or let's say an Anadarko, a fairly large company that has an X number of wells to drill in a year. Let's say, okay, for these 5 wells, we're going to try this experiment out. What can hurt? We're going to drill the wells anyway. We're going to be overseeing it. We're going to be watching it. Let's see how the model works, and the model may work. You know, at one point in time, everybody ran away from turnkeys, and turnkeys have been up and down. It's ebbed and flowed in the business based on how well the turnkeys can do. This is kind of a hybrid turnkey in the fact that, yeah, the service company would have some control over the say-so of the well. The operator still controls everything, but there's an additional voice there, and everybody's working toward that same goal, getting more hydrocarbons out of the ground. Don't base it on footage. Don't base it on days. Base it on the amount of hydrocarbons produced, and then you're changing a real model at that point in time.
So one of the interesting things that, you know, we talk about a lot with being on the drilling side is, and with automation a little bit, is creating a digital twin. Is there the possibility of creating a digital twin for these different business models to see which one could work best?
I think that's a good potential. That's where you might bring in some AI into this, and the fact that if you have a good enough earth model and you know what you think your reservoir model is looking good enough, you build that, and then you can run your scenarios for various business models on, you know, if we do it this way, and not just looking at the one silo, look at the multiple silos to make that the end result be where you want it to be, and see what it takes to get there. So yeah, that way you can do the iterations number of times based on that model.
All right.
As long as you build your model right, that's the secret.
Yeah. So a couple of comments here from the audience. So Brian Dugas says the operators used to help fund projects when the technology did not exist. Your thoughts, Duncan?
Yeah, I've been involved in quite a few of those. I've walked out of clients' offices with a check for $10 million to develop a new LWD system. But those days are few and far between. Most of these, you know, I was involved in my consultancy hat. I was involved in a joint industry project about a year and a half ago, trying to raise some money for some new innovative deepwater drilling technology, and we had a very difficult time getting any of the operators to commit any kind of money that would actually end up saving them tremendous amounts of money if they would just had put in, and the ask wasn't that much. I think the ask was, I think the client needed 15 million, and they already had like 7.5 committed, so they just needed a few more million to get this to the stage of perfection. They already had models built, they had everything, and it's a very innovative product. Can also be used in wind farms and setting piles for wind farms, and it's still going. And these guys are doing they're slowly raising the money. But we were greatly surprised to see the reluctance on the operator's perspective on releasing those dollars, because, you know, the industry's changed so much from the days of the big JIPs to the days of writing the big check out for technology. They're looking at their ESG shareholders. They're looking at trying to buy back shares to make their company more profitable. So the dollar basket is being spread even further than it ever has been, and it's much more difficult to get that to happen. And that's why they're putting more and more pressure on the service companies to develop those technologies.
I want to ask a follow-up question. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that there has been a cultural change from investing money into new and improving technology to now where, you know, the budgets have tightened up so much?
Oh, that's, if I knew that, I wouldn't be talking to you. I'd be sitting in Vegas, you know, if I were that good. But I think, you know, we're seeing a lot of things. There's been a big cultural change, and there is the I hate to downplay it too much. It hasn't been a very big commercial success, the ESG experiment, where the company's lifeblood has been tied the last couple of years to how aware they are of their ESG policies. ESG to me is really not that new. Every company always had safety, culture, environment as part of their mainstays. The McKinsey company and other companies like that came in and put a new name to it so they could make some money consulting. I think I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't degrade other consulting companies, but it was just a new way of looking at things. So with all the publicity out, the oil and gas industry has never had a very good reputation in the media. So, you know, they're trying to change things, and we see some of those things work, some of them don't. But the reality is the generational change, you know, going from the boomer generation, you know, to the X gens, to the millennials, their concept of what a good company looks like is different than what the concept of what me as a boomer thought a good company looked like. We'll see how that shakes out. We made our share of mistakes. Yes, we did. I think they're making their share of mistakes. Yes, they are. But we need to keep achieving that. But the problem is until we're still trying to do things the old way with new things, and technology since the pandemic took a back door, it's starting to come back. And there's some attitudes, and I've talked to quite a few people that, well, we don't need any new technology because we have all the measurement systems that we need. Well, you know, that's when they first came out with the patent office. They said, well, we need to close the patent office down. We've discovered everything there is, so we won't be writing any more patents. This was back in the late 1800s. I'll never forget that, reading that story. But yeah, there's always innovation. There's always new technology that needs to develop. It's just where do we put that, and the importance of where does our dollar spend go?
All right, I want to get into some of the comments that we've got here. Enough from me. So Robert says, less cost per foot was Christensen's motto for decades, yet today's goals for a well are more complex, smoother hole, properly positioned, WRT, the reservoir, hydrocarbons, etc. Any thoughts there, Duncan?
Yeah, you know, he's right. I worked with Robert a number of years. We're good friends, actually. Great guy. And I agree with him. The fact that, you know, back in the old Bill Tooth X3A Halliburton bit that was built. I'm sorry, Baker Hughes bit. Good Lord, I bite my tongue. It was a great bit. It was a workhorse for many years in the soft Gulf of Mexico. But innovations came along, and so yeah, less cost per foot was the big motto, because it was the way that the service companies marketed the more expensive bit. So they couldn't charge a whole bunch of money for a bit that was unproven because nobody knew what it was. So they had to figure out a way to, how can we spend this to allow the operator, instead of buying a $3,500 bit, let's sell them a $35,000 bit. Well, it's got to stay on the bottom longer. It's got to have more revolutions while it's turning, and it's got to make more hole. So, yep, less cost per foot. And yes, there's when the rotary steering came out, I worked on the auto track program at Baker. When rotary steering came out, it was an impossible. Oh hell, I worked on when we were trying to put top drives on drilling rigs when I was at Santa Fe. Nobody wanted to spend that kind of money on putting a top drive, because everybody said, well, it's not any better than just a old rotary table out there. It's just, you know, it's just another cost of expensive piece of equipment that's going to break down. Well, I'd be hard pressed to find a rig today without some sort of top drive on it, particularly offshore. The same thing with rotary steerables. You know, when they first came out, you know, they were charging more for a rotary steerable than they were for the drilling rig per day. And That's come down because there's a lot of them out there. But you can't say that rotary steerables, they really did change the way we drill wells. So yeah, there's always going to be changes as technology matures and it becomes more commonplace. So yeah, you always need to have that next new thing out there available.
All right. John Dahl says contracts with incentive bonus calculated on 60-day IP. Your thoughts?
Probably have to look into a little bit more. 60-day may be too short because it depends on the production rates. I mean, if you're drilling a well in Kansas and you're pumping 5 barrels a day out of that well versus offshore Gulf of Mexico or offshore or in the Middle East where you're pumping 10,000 barrels a day, obviously you need to look at that. But I think that's sort of in the right direction. Again, it ties it back to the hydrocarbon production as opposed to the fact that at the end of the day, we've drilled our well, we reached TD. Now I can go home and take my toys and go away. Give me my check. Thank you very much. No, there's got to be a little bit more to it than that.
All right. Then John DeWart jumps in here. Do you think we need to figure out how to determine and measure a better well for drilling reward rather than get into production payments?
Yeah. Okay. Better well. Is he talking mechanically? Is he talking straight borehole? At the end of the day, it still comes down to the amount of grease we suck out of the ground. So, that's the bottom line. So the better well to me is, I don't care how ugly it is. If I'm getting a lot of oil and gas out of it, I'm just as happy. So yeah, we maybe need to come up with a better definition of what a better well is. But to me, it always relates back to the amount of hydrocarbon we suck out. And again, the best reward is if me as a service company are putting my best and brightest people and technology and equipment, and I'm taking a risk at putting that out there at a lower cost, I'd like to see some kind of reward for that. Otherwise, I'll be more than happy to charge you the standard day rate. And I don't care if you make a well or not. So, and by the way, if you ask my opinion, I get paid whether you pay me my $1,000 a day or not. You can take my opinion or not. I'm still going to get paid for it. That's the problem with the traditional model. Whereas if my opinion has value to the operator and gets him to the point of producing a better well, then we're really starting to see a true partnership there.
Another great segue into the next question. Robert says, production sharing contracts for drilling might result in more DUCs to delay or avoid royalty payments.
Yeah, it's a long-term game. You get paid, not pay me now, pay me later. Then that's fine. If the service company has the guts to do it, maybe they can say, maybe the contract can be built on. You delay the payment, we charge you more interest on it. And we'll increase the amount of production that we see out of that. So if you go online right now and start producing, pay me my money and I'm gone. If you push it for a year or 2 years, I'm still going to get my money, but the cost of money has to be included in that somehow.
Rightfully so. Eric says, share risk or turnkey contracts are pertinent, assuming the right goals are set. I think this plays very well into Robert's previous comment, and that if the goals are aligned and they're properly set, then things like what Robert was talking about and what your answer was may not take place. But your thoughts?
Well, no, I think absolutely the goals have to be set. As with any contract, you don't just walk into something like that on a handshake. You've got to have the rewards, the penalties, everything spelled out. So, and that means setting the proper goals. People, companies pay bonuses to their employees. If you incentivize them the wrong way, they're going to do the wrong thing. You incentivize them the right way, they're going to do the right thing. So the same goes with any kind of contract. If I'm gonna hire a guy to come dig a hole in my backyard to put a pool in, I want to make sure that we understand what that pool is going to look like before I pay him his money. It's all.
That would be a good thing to define before somebody
exactly
digs a hole in your backyard.
And how does a hole in my backyard differ from a hole in the ground where a company's trying to produce hydrocarbons? You've got to have your goals properly set. And what is it? What does this payment scheme look like? What does it mean?
That's a Vidor locksmith first, comparing getting a pool in your backyard to drilling a oil well.
Hey, a hole in the ground is a hole in the ground, right?
Right. So a little comment conversation here. So John says, over to Robert, production-based contracts waxed in the late 90s, early 2000s, then waned with service companies closing down their production enhancement contracting groups.
Yeah, he's right. And again, it came to some of that was very narrow goals from the service companies. They, rather than looking at it from a larger picture, they usually tied some of this into very narrow scope or very narrow. You know, when you're looking at a big service company, there's a lot of conflicting product lines in there. Sometimes these contracts are built around one product line versus another. So the product line that benefits, if they have a change in management and they don't like that anymore, they can destroy a contract. But if it's at a higher level and it's a benefit to all the product lines within that service company, it can be extended out. I'm not saying that this is a permanent thing or it should be a permanent thing. I'm just saying, let's look at it for a different way of doing business. And it may be, in lean times, it may be a way for service companies to keep their lights on. In lean times, it may be a way for operators to drill some extra wells without putting a huge staffing up as big as they may need to, because then they can start relying on the expertise within those service companies, and let it grow or contract or expand as needed. But the current model is stale, and it while it works, I think there's better opportunities that can be looked at.
And then Robert makes a great point here. Drilling automation is still largely focused on drilling down a stand. This used to be the major time spent drilling, but as ROPs increase, it is a smaller part of the whole drilling process. Integrating other drilling processes in the automation is needed.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, drilling down a stand is one thing. How much rock can we destroy and push that pipe down? Even from a very simplistic situation, you can drill yourself into trouble. You load your annulus down with too many cuttings, and then who cares how fast you drilled those last 10 stands? All of a sudden you're stuck, or you blow through a potential production zone and you don't do the proper evaluation, or you cut a fault and you have other problems. So yes, automation needs to be looked at from a holistic perspective in the entire drilling process. And I would go to say not just the drilling process, but the geology process as well. Let's evaluate. Let's not forget why we're poking that hole in the ground. We want to know what those rocks and that gas looks like. We want to know what's there. We're not drilling through concrete. We're drilling through Mother Nature, who has lots of little hidden surprises. Some of the best fields have been discovered are zones that were not even mapped out. So there's a lot of production that has been bypassed. If you look along the upper Gulf Coast, that used to be very prolific and huge, then all of a sudden the next shiny thing, it started with Austin Chalk, and then it went up to the Bakken, then it went out to the Marcellus, and it went to the Permian, back and forth several times. There's huge amounts of production that have been bypassed in the upper Gulf Coast that nobody even wants to look at. The infrastructure there's some, some of these wells were drilled down and stopped because we hit our target zone and we're going to produce that. We don't even know what's below us. So a lot of these old fields have a lot of production that's not there. So we need to be able to figure that out again, because there's still a lot of hidden surprises down there. Part of the hidden surprises in this automation is, yes, we want to turn that rotary to the right as fast and as efficiently as we can. But again, let's consider the rocks and the gas that we're looking at as we go through it so that we can do a better job of extracting that grease out of the ground.
David says, interesting discussion time for Friday afternoon. Let's do something crazy. All right.
Well, David's crazy, so that's okay.
All right. Well, there we go. And Eric says, operators really save a lot of money when they will stop working in silos. Also, service companies may not benefit from it. Your thoughts on being able to break down those silos on the operator side to be able to make, kind of this new business model potentially work?
Well, yeah, there's definitely silos within the operator side. Many years ago, I gave a presentation. At the time, this was back in the late 70s, I think it was. There were commercials on. It's 10:30. Do you know where your kids are? Because trying to. Well, I did a presentation. I said it's midnight. Do you know where your mudlogger is? And it was the whole joke around this was the mudloggers worked for two different companies, although it was under the same name. They worked for the geologist, but they also worked for the drilling engineer. And the biggest job a mudlogger did back in those days was to interpret between the geologist and the engineer and tell each other what the other one was doing. So there's even silos in the drilling of a well. There's often conflicting goals. Heaven forbid, particularly on U.S. land, a geologist dare tell a driller, slow down through this zone because I want to see what those rocks look like. That driller will keel haul him if they can find a lake big enough to keel haul him on, if you know what keel hauling is. So yeah, there's a lot of silos there. And very often those silos are perceived to be within that oil and gas company. Each of the companies have those. The service companies have those same silos, by the way. You look at a company like a Halliburton, the 1,000-pound gorilla there is the fracking group, the pressure pumping group. But I work for a tiny subset of a subset of the drilling side on the mud logging. I had my own product line, but it was tiny compared to these big guys. And yet, Halliburton was smart enough to recognize that we made just as good a profit, maybe even better than some of these other sides did, but we had limited market. Coring, conventional coring is probably the most profitable service that a service company can provide. The problem is there's not enough coring to really justify that as a business. So so no matter how good you do in your coring operation, it's a limited amount of money. So when these operators start looking outside of the oil and gas industry, as they are with the alternate energy and various things like that, you look at the big service companies, the Schlumbergers, the Bakers, the Halliburtons, they're all developing technology to meet those needs, the winds, the turbines, all the other things. So there's still an opportunity for those guys to be a part of that and be as helpful on that side of it as others. So there's always opportunities there. We are in the energy industry. We're not necessarily the oil and gas industry.
Very true. All right. Once again, here Robert says, so true, Duncan. We're drilling through Mother Nature, who has a lot of hidden surprises.
Yes, Mother Nature can be a real bitch sometimes, I guess.
All right, Duncan, as we're kind of getting here towards the end of the hour, anything else that you would like to be able to share with the audience is something that the industry really should know or be aware of?
Yeah, I talk to a lot of young folks that are thinking about getting in the industry, and they're particularly this younger generation that doesn't understand the ups and downs of the roller coaster that we've been on. I have never seen an industry like the oil and gas industry where they can take a young kid out of university, put him in charge of a multi-million-dollar project, and yeah, they'll get upset if something screws up, but they're not going to kill him. It's a great industry to be in. There's a lot of excitement out there. You can travel, you can see the world. I've been in dozens and dozens of countries. There's nothing like it. So I would always encourage anybody to stay in university, do the right thing. Don't downplay the oil and gas industry just because the news media says we're bad guys. We're not bad guys. We do everything that we can to make things right.
Well, here's one last thing to be able to put in here. Our biggest competition will never be other companies, but instead tradition.
Yeah, I happen to know that guy. He's my son.
Very wise words there. Very
Yes,
wise
it is.
words.
He learned that from the master.
Well, Doug, thank you so much for being on the show today. Want to do this real quick. We've got to be able to give away a drill bit.
Sure.
Share screen. I forgot to bring all this stuff up a little bit ago. There we go. Share. Bring that back in. Put this on the screen. And we'll go ahead and hit the drawing. This is all the people who put in the hashtag Gibson for today. Duncan, thank you so much for being here and being a part of this. It's absolutely amazing. And look, there's our winner for today.
It's not a fix, guys. It's not a fix. I didn't have anything to do with that.
No worries. Robert, reach out to me on LinkedIn. We'll get you a drill bit set off Gibson Reports drill bit. Thank you for participating in the show and watching your dad be here on the show. Doug, it's been an absolutely amazing conversation. Learned so much. Really do appreciate it. Hopefully we will see the industry take a step forward in being a little bit more innovative on the business side of things. All right, guys, that's it from me. I've got my list here. Next week, we've got Jim Crumpton, who's coming in, then Wayne Prejean, and then Tim Raines just after that, who's part of he's a consultant within the small business unit of helping out with small businesses, being able to get funds and stuff from the U.S. government to be able to work on fun little projects. I think that's it for me. Hope everybody has a wonderful weekend, had a great short week, and then has another great weekend. So let me find a little button here. That's it for me. As always, know your industry.